தமிழரின் பிம்பம் உங்கள் டிவி.
Welcome to CrossRoads on TVI, a show that showcases the Tamil Canadian community, their issues and their successes. I'm your host, Manjula Salvaraja. As you've probably heard, especially if you have Leafs fans in the house, multiple times, again and again, repeatedly, often, you name it, the Toronto Maple Leafs are in the playoffs. As the excitement mounts, we bring together guests in the studio to talk about fighting in the NHL. Is this something that should be kept in the NHL, or do you think it ought to be kicked out? Now, I'm going to take a minute to introduce our guests here, and as you can see, they came wearing, I guess, the colors of the teams that they support. Prakash Kumar is in financial management and accounting. He lives and breathes the Toronto Maple Leafs, as you can see from his jersey. And even though he may not play hockey, he's a true hockey fan and plays cricket, volleyball, golf, and soccer. He thinks it's time to boot out the fighting. Senthoori Sivagurunathan is in health management at York University and a lifelong student of Carnatic music. She loves playing sports and is an avid Toronto Maple Leafs fan. She is on the fence in this issue. Reggie Jeyaranchen is a York University student who is actually doing something exciting. He's taking a break to working for a startup. Now, not only has he played in a house league, he loves this game. He thinks fighting is a part of hockey and it should stay. They're again all with us in the studio today. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having us.
So, before we get into talking about fighting itself, I'd love to know how you guys got into the game. I mean, Reggie, how did you get into sort of watching or playing the game? Well, when did this happen?
Well, for me, it was in elementary school. Kids would come in, oh, did you see the game last night or whatnot? And I never knew, what they were talking about. So I wanted to know, what this big excitement was all about. So I actually started watching hockey, and then, the moment I saw it, I actually fell in love with the sport. So then I got my parents to, help me join a house league and whatnot, and that's how I fell, in love with the sport.
And it's ice hockey that you actually play in the house league.
It was only for one season. I didn't know how to skate, so, I quit after that, but the love for the sport stayed.
Interesting. Senthoori, how about you?
I guess I was really attached to my uncle, and he was a hockey fan, so I can't remember what my first game was because I've been watching this since I was a kid. So it goes all the way back.
Really? And you still watch it, that is?
Yeah, here and there.
Here and there. Prakash?
Oh, well, when I came to Canada in '95, and it's just to fit in with school friends, and then as you get older in work environment, I started following hockey, and then I guess since '95.
And that's true, because it is part of sort of the Toronto work culture as well.
Yeah, I mean, it has helped me in career-wise too, because I fit in with everyone.
Oh, so that's actually an interesting point. That you actually kind of got into it and now it opens up discussions. Yeah. Now, why do you guys love the game? I mean, I'll start with you, Senthoori. Why is it? I mean, why this particular game? What aspects gets everyone so excited?
It's the excitement that the game brings. That's all I could say.
Really? But what is it? Is there a particular element you think, Reggie?
I think it's because it's fast-paced. It's really fast-paced, and because it's a Canadian game. We all love hockey. It's just part of the culture, so.
Mm-hmm. Prakash?
Yeah, it's part of the culture, and it's the pace of the game, right? And now it's even getting better. They have the players are more skillful, athletic. So, and also you want to fit in with Toronto.
So it becomes it's a social thing.
It's a social thing.
You said something interesting. Are you saying that the players nowadays are more skillful than in the past?
That's right. I mean, these guys, they even in summertime when they're off, they work hard. They're in strict diets. They have all these coaching clinics. Even some of these superstar players, they still go to these clinics and work on it. They're on a strict diet, so...
That's interesting, but why do you think compared to the past? Is it because there's more people trying to become hockey superstars, or...?
It's the competitive nature, right? And the money, I guess. Money is the other.
Have the rules changed to actually make them more skillful in any way?
Yeah, in some ways, they took some things like hooking and holding, grabbing, they took those away, so... if you're a fast skater, before they could grab you, they could hook you with the stick and slow you down. Now you can't do that. So if you're a fast skater, it gives you more opportunity to score goals and be a better player.
Interesting. So now I'm going to get, I don't know if you
Can I
sound like
add
you want to
something
add
this
to
point?
that.
Yeah, so the hockey players now, it's like as if they're superhuman now, right? And I think a lot of the reasons, I think a big reason for that is that there's a lot more science in sport right now. They actually, take slow-mo frames and they actually slow it down to see how players are playing. And they also, put them on certain diets, like he mentioned, right? So if you were to do a comparison check between the players from like 1960 to now, the physique is much more bigger. They're
Definitely.
Like if you stand next to a hockey player, they're huge, right? So
I watched some footage of an old game, and actually that surprised me. I'm like, why do people look smaller in these, right?
I mean, like back in the days, even like in 1999, 2000, I know like hockey players who played for NHL, they smoked and all. I don't think so anyone now smokes in NHL.
Because it's just like a health,
it's a health thing.
note.
And it's their career, right?
Yeah.
So they want to train. They want to be at the best at what they do for a living, right? And it's like the Olympics happens every 4 years. In those 4 years, those athletes are very committed to training for the Olympics. It's equivalent to that.
It's using all of the factors. And you said it too, like career-wise, I'm assuming that there's so much more money if you just get a little bit better, right? The jump is so much better. So Senthoori, I'll start with you. Why the Leafs? Are you a Leafs fan?
Yes.
Well, why the Leafs? I mean, their history around winning, I'm told, I'm no hockey expert, is spotty, right? Why the Leafs?
Because I'm from Toronto, and like Toronto, it has like the most highest like fan base, and even though Leafs might have let us down the past 9 years, but we're committed Leafs fan, and we'll never put them down. It's like the Raptors, for example. There's so many Raptors fans in Toronto, but why do they support Raptors?
It's the same thing. It's just it's so you guys tell me, you came in wearing your jerseys. Why are you still a Leafs fan?
It's just, like she said, it's just the fact that you're in Toronto, you want to support your home team, right? And then, you follow up with the games, you kind of create a personal connection with the players, you kind of relate to each of them. And, it's just, yeah, you can also argue the other way, there are a lot of Toronto fans who are for other teams. Like we have a lot of people who are not for Toronto as well. So you have that mix, and it creates discussion. When you go out for a social outing with your friends or not, it's like, why don't you support Toronto? You live in the city, you should support our team. So, I think that's what it boils down to.
The other fans he's talking about who are from Toronto, they're mostly like they have some sort of connections. Like someone might be from Windsor, they moved to Toronto, so naturally they are like Detroit fans because they were in Windsor. Like Toronto has a huge fan base in Buffalo because Buffalo didn't have hockey back. I mean, I'm not sure when they came into the league, but before that, like they used to support Toronto. So it was like generations and generations, the people in Buffalo, they've been supporting Toronto. So even though now they have a team in Buffalo, but some of those fans are still supporting Toronto. Like I've been to a Buffalo game and I saw more Leafs jersey there than in Toronto.
That's interesting. Really, yeah. That's interesting. So have you guys been to a live game? Anyone here? What is it like at a live game, Senthoori?
It's just the excitement and there's so much emotions going on in the game. And
how is it different, would you say, from watching it on TV, which is probably the medium that I'm more familiar with? Like, what would you say it's like being there at the game itself?
You get to experience everything when you're in a live game. When you're at the TV, it's not the same thing. To me, like sometimes when I watch a sport on TV, it just feels like my brother's sitting there playing this video game, but it's different when you're live and it's happening, and it's that adrenaline you get when you're watching that game live.
I heard someone out there in the lobby tell me that they think that hockey is actually one of the more exciting games to watch live. I don't know.
If you take any sport, hockey is one of those sports you might get a better experience watching live. Like I go to basketball games. Basketball is not as exciting as watching live compared to hockey. Same thing with baseball. And with live, I guess like like I said, I went to a Buffalo game, and you have other fans, like Buffalo fans, sitting next to you, and then you have this. Well, it's not an argument, like you keep on going back at them and make fun of their team or whatever. That it brings more excitement in that way.
the fact that it's live, and I think you see a lot more of sort of the skating and the them going into the ice. And I just watched recently. I watched a game at a local arena. I have a story about that later. I actually got hit by a puck. It was very painful, and we'll talk about that when we get to concussions. Some people out there know about this story, but what's interesting is that it was so fast paced, and it was just a bunch of adults who got together for recreation, and it was still exciting to watch. I mean, these were not even people who were close to being professionals, right? So then let me talk about I'd love one of you to give us, I think Senthoori's touched on it, it's been a while. What is the history around the Leaves and playoffs and the Stanley Cup? Because I think before we get into the debate, I'd like to, one of you, perhaps Reggie, if you can.
Sure.
So how have they performed so far? Why the excitement about the Leaves making it into the playoffs?
It's such a big deal now because I think it's like since 2003 or 2004.
2004.
Yeah, so it's been that long since we haven't made it to the playoffs, right? And I think the last time we won the Stanley Cup was like 1967. So my dad was like 6 years old when that happened. So, it's been such a long time. So we actually have a chance now. And, for a lot of Leaf fans, it's kind of like, it feels like we're winning the Stanley Cup. It doesn't even though we're not, anywhere near to it, we did make it to the playoffs. It just feels like that this alone is good enough for us. It's such a big deal.
Interesting. So I'm guessing you're all excited. One of the things and the reason that we pulled you all together is the fact that, there has been this discussion going on about fighting in the NHL. And it goes back and forth. There seems to be little action that happens in terms of rules and things of that nature. How do you guys feel? We'll go through. I mean, we've shared that on air already. How do you feel about fighting in the NHL?
Well, fighting in NHL is basically, it's a North American culture. It was part of the game when they started playing. So that's what it is. But as the time goes on, the reasons behind it have changed. Now we have enforcers, goons, and pesty players. So I think it's not necessary to have fighting.
Okay, interesting. Okay, so that's your position. And we'll come back to defining some of those words later. Senthoori?
I guess I'm kind of stuck in the middle. And as I am for violence, it's also against it just because of the amount of injuries that hockey players are getting and their careers are ending. And most of these hockey players, hockey is their life. And because of these injuries, their career are ended. But at the same time, it's just a part of how the game works. And that's what makes hockey so unique and differentiates it from other sports.
Interesting. Okay. Reggie?
I'm actually for fighting. A lot of you guys mentioned before that, when you go to hockey games, it's really fast-paced and exciting. And I think fighting adds to that effect. Fans get into it. It gives the team energy. And, say they're down by a goal or whatnot, the teams, they actually feed off the energy that the fans give if, a player wins a fight. So I think it should stay, and it's part of the culture, and yeah.
Well, I mean, as you said, it's...
And before we get into that debate, and I know I will, I do want to ask you a question, because we talked about this term outside, you and I, Senthoori. What is an enforcer? Because I've heard it here. Perhaps you can explain both to me and to the audience.
An enforcer is pretty much a player that is being hired to protect the skillful player of the team. And there's going to be other players trying to instigate fights with, for example, Sidney Crosby, as everybody knows who that is. But an enforcer is there to protect Sidney Crosby from...
To do the fights for him? To a certain extent.
Yeah, probably kind of do the sports, but more to protect him. Because if Sidney Crosby does get into a fight, he gets penalized and he has to stay out of the game so to prevent all of that.
Okay, so this person holds that. Now, you mentioned two other types of mean people. I think you said thugs and goons.
No, well, goons are the people that actually starts these. There's a perfect example of Sean Avery. I think we had a conversation about him.
And who does Sean Avery?
He played for New York Rangers last, and he's not a fighter. If he's asked to fight, he'll just walk away. But he will go and create, start up fights. Basically, annoys people.
And he would be a goon then?
Yes, he's a goon.
He's the type of in-your-face type of guy.
In-your-face type. And, he does, like, dirty shots at players. There's also Matt Cook, the guy that comes to my mind. He's a similar kind of player.
So what would a thug be then?
Well, there's no thug. They don't use thug. But goon and enforcers are like thugs.
And are they actually high, like impression is they're brought onto the team for that particular role.
Yeah.
So basically, the management knows, which is why we're having this, knows that this is the role that they're going to play.
It's funny thing is that when you talk about management, like these management complaints when their superstar players gets hurt by one of these guys, but then they also go and hire, like they basically go and sign these guys for their team. So it makes no sense. Like, I mean, when something happens to their player, yeah, you shouldn't have these guys, but then why do you have these role players in your team? I don't think it's necessary.
Now, how much fighting happens in other sports? I mean, I don't see it in. Yeah, I would say. I mean, basketball. You talked about you like basketball. There's
no tough violence tolerated. Even in basketball, if someone knows to punch someone else, they're automatically kicked out of the game, and they can even be suspended from that entire season.
So it's substantial. Okay. So now we know that it stands that way. What about within the NHL itself? What are the rules? What are the constraints on that fighting? I mean, how far can people go? Are there penalties that they can incur for a certain amount? Perhaps you can define that for us, Reggie.
With a fight, it's mutual, right? So two players have to drop their gloves in order to initiate a fight. And the fight can go on as long as it can until one player hits the ice, and that's when the fight stops. So the linesman will come in and break it up. If, for example, one player drops their gloves and the other player doesn't, the player that drops their gloves, they go into the box for 5 minutes. So that's how it works.
So I mean, to jump into that, it's basically called stage fight. That's what it is allowed. Why do we need to have a stage fight? It's not part of the game. Before it was different. The players fought for themselves. It could be a superstar. They will fight. They didn't have this role enforcers. So that's why it was part of the thing. Now these guys, the enforcers are pretty much big, strong guys. And when they throw a punch and if they hit someone, it's pretty hurtful. Compared to back in the days, the guys were smaller. Their physiques, it wasn't as damaging to their health.
What's the correlation with safety equipment? Do you think that that's something that's changed over time and allows people to get a little? You think that
I mean, like the equipments have changed. They
substantially.
Basically, what happens is now the equipments are lighter for the players to be more skillful, but at the same time they are stronger, hard. So when someone throws a punch and if it hits someone's hand, it could hurt a lot.
Okay. So when the fight happens, it's kind of allowed to happen, and then they're given penalties after. That's the way that it stands. Interesting. So, what are the rules when it comes to sort of younger leagues? Reggie, because you played house league, you can tell me. I mean, even on the professional level, what happens?
So with any other leagues, like other than the NHL, what they do is they usually suspend you. It's not tolerated at all, especially with
so even at the college, university level,
they do fight. They do. You see it happen all the time, but they get suspended. They get ejected out of the game, right? And for some leagues, they make you pay a fine, right? And that fine, they use that for, I think, the NHL's player injuries fund or something like that. So they actually take it out of their paycheck as well, right? But they don't tolerate it at all. It's just only in the NHL that they just allow it.
Okay. So I think what we're going to do is we're going to take a break now, and then we'll come back to the point that you made, Prakash, which is, why is this still in here? And I think it's the idea of staged fights too. I mean, that was something that caught my attention because it's pre-planned. And this is not the MMA. This is not, the Wrestling Federation or something. Why are these happening? And perhaps Reggie's just ready to go. He's ready to talk about this. He's like, okay, so we're going to come back to that conversation. Stay with us. You're watching Crossroads on TVI with Manjula Selvarajah. Welcome back to Crossroads on TVI. We are discussing fighting in the NHL with 3 fans of the game and apparently fans of the Toronto Maple Leafs as well. In our studio today, we have Prakash Kumar, Senthoori Sivagurunathan, and Reggie Jeyaranchen. Welcome back, guys. So Reggie, I'll start off with you. Why do you think fighting still, you've heard some portion of the debate here, why do you think it still ought to stay in the game.
Because it adds energy. It adds energy to the teams when they do win a fight. You know, say if they're down 1 goal, you know, it gives them, it's sort of like motivation for them to, you know, yes, you know, we can do this. We can actually, you know, win this game and turn the whole thing around. So I think that's the reason why it should stay.
It should stay. Prakash, I don't know if you have any.
I mean, when they say, like, they use this excuse as an example, like they say it motivates. I don't buy into that, because a clean check can also motivate fans in the arena and get them all going, and it'll give boost. So you don't need to have this fighting in the game to do that. Like, especially all these fights nowadays are all stage fights. There's no other fights. You know, it's basically 2 people have to, like, you know, if you go after a superstar, he's not going to drop a gloves. Unless it's the Ovechkin, he would do it, but
it's usually going to be against someone that is,
it's no need for it. Like, there's so many ways of, and also, like, these infos, they're basically taking up a spot of a skilled player, right? Do you want to, like, you're making the game to be more skillful? Why are you taking up a spot of a skilled player to have these guys? These infos plays like 3-4 minutes maximum a game, and they sit in the penalty box for 5 minutes. Sometimes they're kicked out of the game. So there's no need for these guys to be there.
But you know, Prakash, just some people may say that there's fighting in sort of some other sports, like we mentioned the MMA, we've mentioned, you know, wrestling, boxing. Gosh, boxing can be actually quite violent. I mean, people are okay with that, right?
But that's the part of nature of that game, though. Hockey is not fighting. Fighting is not hockey.
Yeah,
hockey is about scoring goals.
To add out that wrestling is scripted, and MMA, the intention is to hurt someone else. While hockey, it's not technically supposed to be like that. It's playing the sport.
That's interesting.
But you guys just said it's part of the nature of the sport, right? So can't you say that fighting is part of the hockey game? Like, it's part of the nature of the sport itself? Like, why separate and say it's not?
It's not, like, hockey is about skating. Players with sticks and skates, they skate and score goals, right? It became because, you know, some people were throwing bad hits or being a bit aggressive on other players. So that's why the fighting started, and, you know, they let it go. And now you're also trying to have, like, a lot of young audience. Is that what you want to have as an example? You know, 2 people fighting at a game? Like,
because that might set, because I would imagine that there are young people that look up to a lot of these stars as role models, and watching a hockey game is still a family experience. I mean, you go to these things and you see, even at the smaller arenas, you see a lot of young families congregating to watch it. I mean, is this what you want young people seeing superstars doing? Reggie?
So that's the argument that I always get. A lot of people always mention that. And the thing that I always say is, like, well, what about martial arts? What about, you know, wrestling? What about boxing? You know, there are a lot of kids who are in martial arts, you know, and it's the whole idea of fake learning. There's a professor called Randy Pausch, right? And he talked about the idea of fake learning where, you know, you do something, but you also learn something else. In martial arts, what is it? You learn respect and tolerance, right? With hockey, you know, it's about teamwork, right? So I think people are focusing too much on one aspect of the game, and they see it as a negative thing when it shouldn't be. It's just one small part. So,
but it's just the fighting, like, like, I don't understand how it's part of the culture. Only, like, North American culture, right? In Europe, they don't fight. Like, perfect example, like in playoffs.
Is that true that in hockey in other countries they don't?
No, they don't have these kind of players. I mean, they don't have that role for it, especially in other leagues. Even in North America, I mean, you know, they say part of culture, but when it comes to playoff, they sit these enforcers. They don't play them. You know, they don't tolerate. The reason they tolerate, like, the teams are encouraged to have these players in an 82 regular season game is because it's lengthy. If someone, you know, gets into a fight and, you know, penalized for it, they can afford to, like, sort of lose and compensate. But in playoff, it's a 7-game series. They don't want to take that chance of, you know, getting a penalty and then losing that game. So they don't encourage fighting in playoff.
Interesting. You know, as much as I see your point about the fact that, you know, it doesn't happen in other leagues, there seems, I mean, if people were that against it, Prakash, I would think that by now there would have been a real movement by hockey moms or hockey dads, or I don't know who they are, but to get rid of it. Do you think it's because, I mean, maybe it does add what do you say to people who say that, it adds something to the game?
So if it adds, how come they don't allow that in the playoff? Like, why is it not there in the playoff? So, and people say, like, there are movements that, fight, like, they protest against these fights, and even like the teams, they talk about like sports shows and all. They're always on the fence because they don't know what to do. They go back and forth. One day they want to have it, one day they don't want to have it, but eventually it's going to go away. And now, because of these fights, because of the advance in medical research and all, they're proving that a lot of people are dying because of that, like some of those past players that
actually
died.
There's some stories, we talked about this.
Yeah.
What are some of the, who are some
Like
of the players?
Wade be like a player who played for Toronto. He was an enforcer. He went into depression because he was on a lot of painkillers and all. He died. There was a player, Rob Hob, I forgot. He played for Chicago. I forgot his name. He died. They did a research on his brain, and he died as a result of concussions of fighting. So now, like people, when these enforcers die for different reasons, they're being examined by medical staff, and like studies are being happened.
And you're saying just even for the concussion or the head injury reasons,
Yeah.
this is. Senthoori, I don't know if you want to add something to that.
No, it's just lost my thought. But he was saying like concussion and everything, but it still happens when with other injuries besides fighting, and because it's such a fast-paced sport, and there are chances of getting in like head concussions without someone punching them in their face. Right?
That's an interesting point.
And
That's
also,
true.
when you become an enforcer, especially, so back in the day, they didn't have so much medical research to know about the consequences of being an enforcer, but now you do. So when new hockey players are becoming enforcers, they know more than they did before of what they're getting into, right?
So they're not ignorant about these.
Exactly.
This is the way that someone who's in one of those fighting sort of, or a boxer knows this is the game plan. This is what I could suffer from.
Exactly.
Interesting. But you make an interesting point about the fact that that people could get injured from other things playing hockey, that it doesn't have to be. I don't know, Reggie, if you
Yeah, so
have,
that's where that fine line is. Like, you can't really prove that all these injuries are happening from, fighting, right? I mean, if you were to compare like the brain of like an NFL player, like a football player, and to that of like an NHL player, like you'd find that they're very similar, and that's because of the hits that they take, right? It's a very high impact game. Right, and I read an article this morning. There's a doctor named Dr. Millsman or something like that, and he mentioned how the types of injuries that they get, it's very minimal from the head injuries. It's very minimal from fighting. It's actually more from body checks and stuff like that. So when people say, oh, we should be careful about head injuries, like I dismiss that argument right away because I don't think it's a valid argument.
Because as this research shows, and I know the data that you're talking about because I found that article, the National Post, as well. So since you've said that, I'm going to read off something to you that's interesting. I mean, we've discussed head injuries, and I want to talk about this. This is, I'm going to quote this. This is actually, I think, a National Post article as well. An Ipsos Reid poll conducted, this is right out of the article, for Post Media News and Global National found that 54% of those surveyed say an outright ban should be placed on fighting in the NHL. So even though I said before that if it ought to have happened, it would have happened already, what this very recent study shows is that there actually is an appetite within the hockey watching population to get rid of fighting. What do you say to that?
I'm kind of that kind of throws everything off now. I don't know.
I mean, 54% is still not 98%.
It's about half, but
yeah.
I figured that a lot of people would have enjoyed it, with the fighting in the game. I think it's because of a lot of medical research that it is going into the game now, that people are looking at these things and they're going, oh, this is really bad. I think maybe some people are overreacting. Maybe I think that's what it is. Maybe they don't know enough. That could be the reason why.
Okay, so let's then talk about the actual excitement, because I hear that element all the time, that people think, and you see, I mean, I had someone that I called, a hockey player, to get some feedback. I think he plays in one of our house league as well. And he said what's interesting is that he's against fighting, but whenever there's a fight that happens, he makes sure he listens to TSN to see a clip of the fight. So my question to both of you, you being on the fence and is that even the people that I spoke to in researching for this that said that they were against it still watch the highlight reel with the fights. So there is an argument that can be made that it still draws a lot of attention to the game. What are your thoughts?
Well, I know a lot of hockey players are going to hate me, but at the end of the day, it's an entertainment, right? And that's why this topic is brought to awareness, because it's a part of hockey, and I believe that Canadian hockey players, just because it's so popular in Canada, that if they were to take out fighting, people will still watch hockey because they're hockey fans. I think it's more of an issue in the States because it's after football, it's hockey that's so violent.
Oh, I see. Okay.
So it's just, yeah.
So it might actually be more important to attract an American audience,
yeah,
who need that maybe to make hockey exciting. Prakash?
Oh, like prime example is like, people always say if you take hockey out of the NHL, you lose audience. I don't buy into it. The reason is, if you look at Olympics, as you said, Olympics don't have any hockey fighting. There's no fighting in it, and there's a ton of people watch it, and Americans watches that. So we're not going to lose the audience. If you're a hockey fan, you're going to watch it regardless. And to her point before about concussions and etc. through different means, it's because those players who throw those hits or hurt other people, they don't have respect for the other player, and that should be, those players should be penalized. Like someone like Sean Avery or Matt Cook, who are pesty players. I mean, goons. There should be no place for those guys either.
How do you go ahead?
Okay, so to add to that point, you'll see in a lot of fights, when players are when they're both fighting, and once they're on the ice, they'll pat each other on the shoulder, which means it's a good fight. It's a sign of respect, right? It's like the reason why they even get into the fight in the first place is like, oh, you went after my guy, now I'm going to come after you, right? It's sort of it's to like make all the players safe in a sense. It's kind of like, I don't know how to explain it, but it's like, oh, if you have a nuclear warhead, I'm going to have a nuclear warhead too. It's kind of like that. That's how I see it, right?
So actually, this brings about a good question that I'd love to know. Why do the fights happen? Is that what it is? It's usually the fact that you hit my player last time, or is it just the tension boiling up so much that they need it? Like, what are the reasons that people actually fight? Senthoori?
I think Reggie should take that question.
Reggie,
He's very for it, right?
Yes. I think it's a way to get out the grudges, right? And it's to make sure that he doesn't come after your guy again.
And what are the grudges here?
It's like, sometimes they make really bad hits against players. Like some players, they get hit really bad and they're injured for like the rest of the season. Right?
And then their entire team is upset.
Exactly, right? So you want to make sure that guy doesn't do it again to one of your other players, right? So it's kind of intimidating. It's kind of like a mind game, So you fight him, he goes down. It's like, yes, you better not mess with my team ever again. It's kind of like, that's the mindset you want to play off.
It's like a couple of different ways though. Like some of them are basically like, say, one of your player from your team throws a body check, which is like questionable, but maybe within the line. And so they don't get penalized. Okay, now from other team, one of the players are going to take that up on him because the guy who got hit, he's a star player, he doesn't fight. So someone else is going to come after you, or that's how it starts.
Usually, like, that's majority of the time, like, that's the reason why that fights start. And
then also, like, mostly like these guys, they sit in their bench and keep on going back and forth. They say a few nice words to each other, and then the coach decides, like, coach will put one of the players, because one of the tough guys on the ice, so the other coach will basically address by putting his tough guys, because they know something is going to happen. And then they stand there, they talk, and then they start fighting like as soon as the whistle go off. That is the stage fighting, and it's something like scripted. Why do you need to have that? There's like wrestling for it. Do it there, not in hockey game. Hockey game is about fun and exciting about the game.
Now, I know when we spoke before the show, you told me, we know your views now, and you told me that you've had many of these debates with your friends.
Yeah.
You're in your circle of friends, and I know that because of sort of the corporate, you're a management exec, so in the circle that what is the opinion on this? Like, where do people stand? Because you move with a lot of people who watch hockey.
Yeah. Well, we are mostly, all of us are against it, because as a result of these things, we have lost some good players, because of these goons, and so we lost like star players and etc. Like Ovechkin is supposed to be one of the star players in the league. We believe that his production has gone down. He has become just an average player. For some reason now he has started coming back to his old form, but because he was getting into fights and his body was getting beaten up, I think it has taken a toll on him. That's why his production has gone down. Now he's back, because you need to have these, like, Ovechkin versus Crosby, who are skilled players. You want to have that
because
rivalry.
That's what
it
and that's the part that you tune in for. So Senthoori, you tell me. I mean, I'm also interested. You definitely are here, and you're a woman, and we know that. I mean, with your circle of friends, what are they telling you? And I wonder if it differs between, when you're talking to your guy friends versus your girlfriends.
For sure, all my guy friends who are hockey fans are for violence. And when I asked them their opinion, I was like, oh, I'm going to come on the show. Tell me your opinion about it. They had nothing for against.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
But on the other hand, my female friends, it depends how much of a fan they are towards hockey. If they're like die-hard hockey fans, they're like, it's a part of the game. That's all I could say about it. So it depends on who the person is and how much they value the sport.
That's interesting. So what you're saying is that the more into it they are, they almost want, because they consider it part of the tradition. Yeah. Reggie, what about you? I mean, you also have people that that play hockey as well.
Well, it's kind of like the same point. It's like some people who are very into the game, they're all for it. But then again, I have a lot of friends who are very divided, and it creates like heated discussions. And I think there needs to be some sort of, I think, open dialogue when it comes to like fighting, because like it's just one aspect of the game, right? I mean, like you said, hockey's about the two top players going at it and scoring goals on each other. I think that's also a big part of the game, right? And I think that is still the big focus, but fighting just adds that little extra kick to the game.
But like nobody ever talks about Colton versus somebody else, right? It's always about Ovechkin versus Crosby or Malkin
the skill.
versus
Do you think that the fighting actually takes away from more skillful playing?
It does.
Good question.
Do you think so?
Oh, that makes me really think about it.
Because we know, I mean, with any field, if you take it, if you change safety equipment, you're telling it changes the nature of the game. So I'm wondering if that element of fighting, you've already, I wonder if it changes actually the degree of skillful playing.
Well, I mean, it'll add more skillful to that. If you take it away, you will have more skillful. But at the end, people have to have respect for one and each other, right? It's you don't want to go there to hurt someone. So as long as you don't do that, I think it'll be more fun if you don't have fighting in it.
Okay. Does any of the sort of the fights that happen, do they leave the arena? Do they leave the arena with these players?
No. It depends. Sometimes it depends. Like usually, like I said, some players, they pat each other on the shoulder and then it's over, right? Or
even when they fight against each other, they'll do that.
Or it can carry out through the whole season. If they face each other, okay, I'm going to come after you again. So I might lose this fight, but next time I'm coming after you. So, I think some players, they need to learn to if it happens in the ring, it stays in the ring, and then
So let's talk about, again, because you probably have watched several interviews with hockey players, and we've talked about what your friends think. What do you think hockey players would want themselves? What do you think? The players themselves, the professionals?
Well, it's a mixed message because they don't know what they want. Like, that's why it's still there. Like I said, they don't want to be hit, but then they have someone to hit, right? So it's they're on the fence. Because say if my teams don't have these guys, what's the guarantee the other team is not going to have a player like that enforcer, right? So that's why every team sort of has it, but eventually everyone has to come to a conclusion and take it away.
So they might be you're saying that they might be too almost embedded in the sport in order to really comment on it. I don't know, Senthoori, if you have any thoughts on that.
No, I was reading an article before and it was on enforcers, and some enforcers are they should get rid of that role from the
enforcers are saying that.
A few, okay. Right? But at the same time, there was another enforcer who said, I said a point before, how when these hockey players do get into the game, they already know what they're getting themselves into, right? So it's a very, as you said, a mixed reaction, and I guess it's how much fighting has impacted their life. So as you said before, that it's caused depression and certain cases of either overdose of drugs or suicide cases have been led to because of fighting in hockey, but it hasn't really been proven. So not really sure.
Yeah, so that's why you're on the fence. Great. Reggie, we're gonna take a break now, but I will get because I can tell you're itching to go to answer that question. So we're gonna take a break now. Please stay with us, viewers, you as well, and we'll be back. You're watching Crossroads on TVI with Manjula Salvaraja. Welcome back to Crossroads on TVI. We're talking about fighting in the NHL. We've been having a lovely debate about it. And let's continue with that. Reggie, I know we ended off with you not being able to make a point, but let me ask you, what do you think the NHL players themselves want?
I think there are mixed reactions as well, but also you have to look at it this way. I mean, there are the little guys in the NHL. I mean, they would appreciate having that extra big guy. They're out, looking after them. So I think that's also something to look after, like to consider. So it is mixed, but I would say more players are for it than against it.
So having heard all of this, do you think that, does your position still stand, or do you?
I don't think it has changed. I haven't heard enough convincing, points, but, I think in the future, I might change it. He brought up some really valid points. I'm starting to think about them now, so it'll be interesting to see how it might play out.
So what do you think that the NHL ought to do?
I think they should keep it for now, because I haven't seen, we haven't seen a big enough movement for it to change, right? So I think they should keep it, and we have to remember that the NHL, it's a money-driven business, right? I mean, at the end of the day, it's still entertainment.
It is a business. We all forget that.
So they want to put off a show. So I guess that's what it is. And you mentioned the Olympics and stuff. I mean, it's not really a show per se, right? It's more about sportsmanship. But in the NHL, it's about entertainment. So
that's an interesting point, actually. That the fact that the Olympics is about that. So fighting may not actually jive with the overall message. Prakash, has your position changed in any way? What do you think the NHL ought to do?
They should take it away.
So you think an outright ban?
Yeah, I mean, it's not going to happen that way, but they have to somehow work it and get rid of it. It's not necessary. It's not part of, they don't need it. Actually, the fans now, if you want to have more female audience to it, like the mothers, they're against it because they don't want their kids watching this, right? So if you want to have more audience and you want to get your fan base larger,
so you think there's an economic might be there might be an economic driver for making that change. Do you think there really is the will to do it? You've said too that it's not going to happen.
It won't happen right now because there's players union and the NHL has to agree to it. So players union consists of these players who are tough guys, who are enforcers. Their votes are going to be against it. I mean, Reggie said that the smaller guys might want to have some of these players to protect them. But
so their votes are going to be in the same way.
No, but if you take the fight away, they don't need anyone to protect them, right? So, and having these guys actually these smaller players can get hurt by one of these guys. So not having them, it's actually benefit to them.
Interesting pitch. Senthoori, what do you think? What do you think the NHL ought to do?
All right, so as everybody know, I'm in the middle of this. And so as you said, they were not going to take it out for now, but maybe they should create a better system towards improving fighting and everything. Like, for example, in soccer, they have soccer players get warnings for every foul.
Oh, the cards, yeah.
So they get yellow cards, and at the end they get a red card. And I think it's they don't get to play the entire.
You get ejected from the
game. You get kicked out of the game with a red card.
Exactly. So there should be a better system towards that, like penalty system, because in hockey, you get timeout, but do you get timeout in the next game? No, right? So they should bring a system like that to avoid fighting, because clearly they're not going to get rid of it.
I mean, they do have some systems like where suspensions and all, but it's not for fighting; it's for dirty play, like
So what you're saying is that some system of that kind for fighting itself, right? That maybe take away penalize it, and slowly, and then maybe that'll kill the behavior over time.
Exactly.
Interesting. Well, I'm going to give you guys a final question because I know you'll all be watching hockey a lot lately. I've heard of these. I know that because family members do it and a lot of friends do it. When people are watching the game, the playoffs, they do strange things, like these rituals to make sure that the Leafs win. I don't know if you have any personal rituals. Like I know a friend of mine who during a game, no one's allowed to use her washroom because she feels like whenever someone goes into the washroom, the other team scores. So I don't know. Do you have any strange rituals like that?
For me, I don't have a ritual. I'm just going to pray. I'm just going to pray and hope that they actually make it. So yeah, that's just it.
What's your prediction, you think?
I don't think they're going to actually win the cup, but I think this is actually a foot in the door for them.
Okay.
But if they do win the cup, I'll probably shave my eyebrows. So yeah.
Okay, if you shave your eyebrows, we're having another discussion. Okay. Senthoori, do you have any strange rituals you do and any predictions?
I don't have any strange rituals. I don't know anybody that does. But all I could say, anything could happen. I'm just going to hope for the best, and I don't want to, go Leafs, go.
Okay, you don't want to say anything
No,
more. Okay,
no.
okay. We'll find some wood for you to knock on later.
I'm superstitious, so when I'm watching the game, I say if I'm at home, like if I change the channel, I'll like change it, come back, change it, and then come back to that channel. Because if I feel like if I do it once, they lose. It sounds funny, but
I'm convinced that must have an effect on the game.
It's like past a few years, like every time they have the game on Leafs TV on a Friday, they tend to lose that game.
They should hook up with you, the management, and you have the secret. Thank you guys so much for coming on. This was a load of fun. I really wish the Leafs the best, and we'd love to have you come on to talk. If anything changes with regards to the rules, which might be 20 years from now, but regardless if it does, or any other hockey-related topics, we'd love to have you back on.
Thank
you for having us.
My pleasure. Here are our final thoughts for the day. 2 weeks ago, we interviewed via Skype an organization called Letters for Ranjini. The founder of that organization, Anthony Bainak, explained that they're advocating for the release of a Tamil asylum seeker named Ranjini and her 3 children who are being held in detention in Australia. Her case was actually quite sad. She has been there for over a year and has even had a baby in detention. I mean, they are advocating with MPs in Australia to try to get her out of detention. However, he asked that people here and everywhere else consider sending a car to Ranjini to keep her spirits high. We at CrossRoads decided this would be a small and lovely exercise to do as we approach Mother's Day. So here's her address. We're going to have it on Twitter and Facebook as well. It's Ranjini, care of Sydney Immigration Centre, 15 Birmingham Avenue, Villawood, 2163 NSW, Australia. And again, that address will be on our Facebook and Twitter accounts, and you can also go on their website, lettersforranjini.com. It's been a pleasure having this discussion. Thank you all for joining us. You've been watching Crossroads on TVI with Manjula Savaraja.
தமிழரின் பிம்பம் உங்கள் டிவி.